I think everybody knows who I am. Maybe not. I'm kidding. I'm Rich Foster. I'm the chair of the Needham Housing Authority. Long time ago, there used to be a chairman of the Needham Housing Authority, but in this day and age, you don't have chairmen anymore. You have just chairs. So I'm the chair of the Needham Housing Authority. We have tonight a really interesting presentation about how we're going to try to get more money sooner to fix up seabeds and Cook. And we have here tonight, first of all, I'd like to introduce the other ones. Introduction, of course, Cheryl Gosman, our executive director. And we have somebody who's run for the Needham Housing Authority Board of Commissioners, the vacated seat over here, Jim Flanagan.
Hello, everybody.
Who has joined the whole program that we have here. And then we have our consultants, some of you, many of you, maybe most of you have seen before, from the Cambridge Housing Authority. Everybody know where Cambridge is? Does anybody not know the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts? My fair city. There's some people here. So Cambridge Housing Authority has become our development consultants. We hired them and brought them on board in mid 2021 to help us figure out how to get more money to do a better job for our residents. I think that's what they've been doing here. So we have Matt Zajac over here. Everyone, Matt. And Chris Moyer over here. Everyone. And they've been working for a couple, 3 years to figure out how to get us more money so that we can fix the place up. I think that's as simple as it gets. So let me turn it over to you.
Great. And I have a question.
Yes.
A favor, actually. You know, we've gotten a lot of information about, you know, what's going on and everything, but a lot of us, myself included, cannot make heads or tails of it. When you talk about like the red, I had to find out what that was. I wish that it could be written in more plain English for us civilians.
Okay.
It is complicated. There's no
And
question about
it could be maybe made simpler for us.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well,
thank you.
we'll keep working with that.
If at any point during the presentation tonight, it seems like it's gone too technical, just shout out and we'll try again. We might not, it might take us 3 times to get to something that makes sense, but we want to make sure we get it to a place where everybody understands. Just let us know.
Carla, is it good?
We have to switch.
Oh, okay.
To see if it works.
Yeah.
That's all.
So as Reg said, thank you very much for being here. We're here to provide another update on the Seabeds and Cook modernization project. So there's a sign-in sheet going around. Just want to make sure everyone has signed it. And for folks who are attending virtually, if you could write your name into the chat, that'd be great. And we are recording this meeting just so that everyone who isn't able to attend can view the video on their own. So the purpose tonight is to provide an update from our December meeting. We were just here a few months ago about converting the property from public housing to Section 8 voucher subsidy. So when we were here in December, we spoke about pursuing the conversion via an option called RAD Section 18. It comes with all of its complications and idiosyncrasies. And NHA is still going to be converting Seabeds and Cook, but we're actually going to be shifting the strategy to something called Section 22. So it's a slightly different option, and we'll be covering what that means. Yes, no worries. And the reason why NHA is going to be making this switch is because HUD recently came out with new guidance that actually makes Section 22 more advantageous for the housing authority. So here's just a quick agenda. We're going to do a quick recap about what repositioning is, why we are recommending to switch to section 22. Then we'll go into some more details about section 22, what it actually all means. Then we'll provide a quick update about the engagement with the architect, BH+A, and then we'll take some questions. So what is repositioning and why should the Needham Housing Authority do it? So the impetus really is the fact that federal public housing funding for that program has stayed stagnant or
The city official trouble. I was taking up 2 parking spaces, I can't park my car.
so federal funding for public housing has either stayed stagnant or decreased over time, and that really makes it hard for housing authorities like the one here in Needham to take care of the property and to serve you as residents. On the other hand, there is another program from the federal government called Section 8, and it provides vouchers to take care of and provide operating income for affordable housing. And this graph here shows the 2 sources for public housing, the red and blue. Those have remained stagnant for the past decade or so, while the green line up above, which is for Section 8, has increased steadily over time. And the goal here is to switch to the higher subsidy program so that the housing authority can take better care of the property. That's the big picture. So then we start to get into the nitty-gritty, and there are a few different options of how the housing authority can actually get to that conversion. And when we were here in December, we were talking about RAD Section 18. And we mentioned that the other option that the housing authority was considering was something called Section 22. And the big difference between the two is that RAD Section 18 focuses on converting one property at a time. And depending on the condition of the property, if it needs a lot of work, then you can get more high value vouchers. And then the remaining units get low value vouchers. And with Section 22, you have to convert an entire portfolio of federal public housing to the Section 8 program. And a benefit of Section 22 is that all of the units get access to the higher value voucher. One other benefit of Section 22, just to note here, is that it provides faster access to that increased subsidy. There's less of a threshold or approval that you have to get from HUD in order to get access to that increased funding. Whereas with RAD Section 18, you have to compile all of your funding to you're required to do a construction project. And you have to wait until you have all of the construction funding until you get approval from HUD to get the increased subsidy. So that delays the point at which you can get access to the extra funding.
So to bring that down to the real world, when we were looking at the Section 18 RAD option, what we were talking about was looking at each individual Needham property, so seabeds and cooked separately, and they would only get 80% of the units would get the generous subsidy from the federal government, and 20% of the units would get a lower amount of subsidy from the federal government. And now what we're talking about under Section 22 is doing all of the properties that Needham have in federal programs, so that cook, seabeds, and higher off all at the same time, and all of those units get the higher subsidy, and none of them get the lower subsidy.
But the main reason why in December we were recommending RAD Section 18 is something called the Fair Cloth Authority. And Fair Cloth Authority essentially is the maximum number of public housing units that the housing authority can own. And Currently, it's 136 for Needham, because that is the number of units at Seabeds and Cook and High Rock. And what's important is to keep your fair cloth authority, because it allows you in the future to build new affordable housing units. And with RAD section 18, MHA could keep 60 of these so-called fair cloth units. So in the future, you could build 60 new units of public housing. Whereas with section 22, you had to forfeit and forego all of your fair cloth. So that was a really big decision and factor why we were recommending RAD section 18. Yes.
Who or what is fair cloth?
Fair cloth, it gets into the details. It's the name of the senator in the 1990, I believe, or 92, who put forth this policy.
Well, here's another way of saying it. It's just a language. So, the way we get our money to make up the difference between the rents that everybody here can afford to pay and the amount we need to maintain the property, or at least partially maintain the property, because we obviously could be doing and should be doing a better job. That's called a fair cloth unit. So each one of your apartments has a fair cloth unit. However the name got there, it's a ridiculous story that I'll tell afterwards, if anybody wants to know. That's what pays for us to be able to be in business. Otherwise, we wouldn't get enough money to maintain the property, even half maintain the property. So, those units are the core of what we use under the old public housing program. Under the new public housing program that we're going to call Section 8, we don't need fair cloth units anymore. We get Section 8 housing vouchers, which, give us a lot more money, as will be explained by Chris in a minute here. And then we can use that more money to do all the catch-up modernization and preservation and fix-up repairs that we haven't been able to afford to do up until now. Does that help in terms of plain English? All right.
Well, just one more thing to add, so why is it important to keep those fair cloth units if we're changing over section 8? And the answer is that, housing authority wants to be able to build more affordable housing in places like the Linden Street property that you may have heard this spring about an effort to redevelop. So there's important to keep that fair cloth authority so it can be used on projects like Linden Street or here in the future.
And stop us every time we get too technical, just like that. So, go ahead.
So
Peter's Digest version.
So this slide shows us the information on the previous slide, but just in a similar format, outlining what aspect of RAD section 18 or section 22 is more advantageous. And the main reason why we were recommending for Needham to pursue RAD section 18 is the significant advantage of fair cloth authority. However, so why are we back here again recommending a pivot to section 22? So in February, HUD released new guidance saying that, in fact, when pursuing a conversion via section 22, you can keep your fair cloth authority. So that changed the whole calculus of this recommendation. So now, when converting the 76 units at Seabeds and Cook via section 22, you can keep all 76 units of fair cloth. And that's actually more advantageous, a better option than RAD section 18, which would only provide you with 60 of the fair cloth units. So this is the same table now showing that the fair cloth authority is actually an advantage under section 22. You can see how many of the section 22 lines have the advantage next to them. You can keep all of your fair cloth authority under section 22. You get all of high value vouchers under section 22. And then for the the next couple lines under point 3 is a little bit nuanced, but under RAD section 18, you're required to do a construction project that would meet all of your needs for the next 20 years. And under section 22, that's not a requirement. But the housing authority is still going to be pursuing renovations, as you all know. And for under section 18, the need to meet the 20-year, all of your capital needs over 20 years means that you actually have to get more funding, and it triggers the need for extra state funding that you don't need if you're pursuing modernization or rehab under section 22. And this is an advantage for section 22 because the housing authority is doing new construction at Linden Street, and that one definitely requires state funding, and so we don't want to create competing projects there. In terms of the amount of required renovation, RAD section 18 would address more capital needs, but we're trying to figure out a way with the architect to address all of the critical needs, all of the medium-term needs that Seabeds and Cook needs via section 22, and you can talk about that more in a bit. Yes.
How we go about federal housing? Getting money up for federal housing, even though we go to the feds for the money. But then is there another way of going about it? That to get the money up for federal housing?
For the construction.
For the construction, right?
So what the pot of funding under section 22 will look like is funding from the government, from the vouchers, private loans, and then other sources of funding that are from the state but are actually not as competitive as the ones that Linden is looking for. In terms of timing to start construction, we can get to that point faster under section 22 because we're not going to be looking for that limited state funding that would potentially delay the project. In terms of time to access the increased subsidy, it's also faster under section 22 because you have to only get a simple approval from HUD and not wait to actually start construction, which is the threshold for RAD section 18. And then the last item down at the bottom is about the requirement to convert IROC as well. And we think that that's actually an advantage to section 22 because the housing authority is already planning to do a conversion at IROC, and doing so earlier means that you get access to that increased.
So how
funding
about
program.
the state of federal?
Currently, it's federal. And it would be part of the same application to convert Seabeds and Cook to the voucher program.
So you mentioned the keyword, private, that's how we would have to go.
No, so the housing authority is gonna either maintain direct ownership of Seabeds and Cook and High Rock, or it would transfer it to a nonprofit affiliate.
Right. For the funds.
That's so under.
This is actually an advantage that's not on Chris's chart.
Yeah.
For the section 22, under section 22 option, Needham Housing Authority is gonna continue to own and manage and handle this project.
Right.
The whole time, whereas when we're over at the Linden Street property looking at that development, it's a scale that Needham Housing Authority is hiring a private developer, which is great and it has advantages. You know, you're to bring somebody with a lot of expertise. But here, I think it's really valuable that they're able to remain fully in the driver's seat on this project.
All right, so now we're gonna jump into some more details of the section 22 conversion. And on your way out, you can pick up the conversion plan here. This is part of what we updated. There's a 5-year plan that the housing authority has to put together. And in order to submit an application to HUD, we had to update it to include details about the section 22 application. So that's the full printed copy, but I'm just gonna run through a couple highlights here. And for folks online, there's a link that we can send to you after we're done here. So the total annual financial benefit of converting from public housing to section 8 is about $3.35 million every year. And that takes into account the units converting at High Rock Estates and Seabed and Cook here. Another thing about section 22 is that you have to close out your public housing funds. So because you're not going to be in the public housing program anymore, you're not going to receive any of your typical public housing capital fund or operating fund that you would receive every year. But that's okay, because you're actually switching to a higher subsidy source via the vouchers. And as part of that, the housing authority will have to use up any remaining public housing funds that it has. In terms of the future use and the neighborhood impact here, Seabeds and Cook, Howard Estates are going to stay affordable housing. They're going to stay under the Needham Housing Authority. There's going to be minimal impact to the total number of units in the neighborhood or affordable housing in the neighborhood. And all residents can remain in their units as part of the conversion. And there's a note here about no longer needing to partner with a private developer. No. In terms of relocation, the conversion itself will not require anyone to move. There is the upcoming modernization project though, so that's a slightly separate thing. We're still working with the architect to actually figure out if people need to move, how long. We're still figuring out those details with the architect, but for the conversion itself, we will not have to move. In terms of rent calculations, most residents will continue to pay 30% of their income toward rent. And a few families who are paying ceiling rents, who are higher income folks, will have their rents rise to 30% of their income. And the income requirements for existing residents will carry over, and then any new residents who move to Seabeds or Cook after conversion will have to have incomes at 50% AMI. Essentially, to you, that doesn't matter. You will be able to stay here no matter what. Then the last key thing about section 22 I want to highlight is consent to project-based vouchers. And you'll hear more about this in the future. We're going to return in the fall to meet more about this item specifically. But essentially, after receiving approval from HUD for section 22 conversion, the vouchers come to the housing authority as mobile vouchers. And then we have to meet with you all and get your consent to project-base those vouchers, so that the units can continue to stay affordable housing and the increased income can be used to renovate the property.
And just a quick question, does everybody understand the difference between a mobile voucher and a project-based voucher?
No.
Okay, so a mobile voucher is, maybe your classic idea section, it's a rental support that you can go to a private landlord anywhere in the community, and it'll help support your rent. You'll pay 30% of your income, and the voucher will pay the landlord the other part. Project-based voucher is when a particular community, like Seabeds and Cook, has that subsidy attached to all the units living there. So when you live at Seabeds and Cook, every person, every unit only pays 30% of their income on rent. But if a tenant moves out, decides I want to have a job opportunity in Framingham, I'm going to find a new housing, they leave their subsidy at Seabeds and Cook. And that's the big difference between a mobile voucher and a project-based voucher, whether it stays at the community where it is or travels with the person.
What's the criteria for that, if a person, decides to, and it was mentioned before about the section 8 voucher. So we
So,
would have to request for that through Needham Housing for that voucher.
Yeah, so that was the option through RAD section 18. You had to wait a full year after the conversion in order to elect to be put on the wait list for a mobile voucher. With section 22, it's slightly different. The vouchers come initially as a mobile voucher. And then the housing authority has to meet with all the residents and get their consent to project base that subsidy to the unit. So it's a slightly different, yeah. So this is gonna be, something that we return to you all in the fall after, we get approval from HUD for the overall conversion application. So I'm sure you'll have many more questions about this and we'll have time to, answer that. Yeah,
If somebody wanted to take the mobile voucher and move, they could or not?
they could.
Okay.
All right, so this is showing the next steps for the conversion. We plan to submit an application to HUD by July 1st. HUD has 90 days to review the application. Then step 3 is when we return to you all and we get your consent to project base the voucher. Then we apply for those vouchers to HUD, that's step 4. Step 5, we do a little bit more administrative work and actually complete the conversion. And then step 6 is once we actually move forward with the renovation using those higher
And how many
income from the
consents that
vouchers.
you would need?
Sorry,
How many consents? You said you'll come to the body. So how many?
so
have to sign up?
ideally, the housing authority can get everyone's consent because that means that all of the increased subsidy can stay at the property and can go to fund the renovations.
but it's not that there is a threshold of residents who need to say, I'm going to take my mobile voucher and stay here. In order for it to happen. It's not like a majority have to vote to approve the program for it to happen. Every resident gets the choice and whoever decide to go mobile, whatever project base.
Yeah.
And if residents do decide to take their vouchers and go mobile, it's not that their units here are then going to become market rate units. Those will still be affordable units, and Needham Housing Authority will explore options to keep them subsidized. Like borrowing units from its its mobile program when they become available, so it can backfill, essentially.
Okay.
This table here shows some more precise timeline for those steps. We're here in June doing these resident meetings. Any questions that you have tonight, I'll write them down and make sure that you get answers to them. And that will become part of the application that the housing authority submits to HUD. Between July and September is when we think HUD will be reviewing the applications. There is a line here for early construction work that relates to the funding, the public housing funds that the housing authority has to spend down before the conversion. So the housing authority is exploring what early construction work can be done. There's a paving project, I believe, that's going to be going on, so that's going to be using some of those funds here. Then in the fall is when we'll return to you all to get your consent to project base, the section 8 vouchers. And then early in next year, January to February is when we think we will be able to complete the rest of the administrative work to actually complete the conversion. And then about a year after that is when the major renovation would happen. And that's when we would be doing things like replacing the sidings of the buildings on Captain Robert Cook, or replacing the kitchens and bathrooms and things like that. And that year between when we convert to Section 8 and when the construction starts, that year is to build up the income to actually finance the construction.
So it sounds like you're saying that. Physically, nothing's gonna get done until 26 or possibly 27.
So there's the early construction work that's gonna sort of give you a taste of what's to come. But the main part of the construction, we don't think will start until early 26.
So why are you waiting so long now to? It's like, shouldn't we be upgraded before we sign over to go to 22?
It's about building up the money in the bank account, so
Yeah,
we're. Needham Housing Authority, when they do the conversion, will start to get that much higher income, that chart that Chris showed earlier. It'll start coming to the bank account, but it takes. That increased income is an important source to fund the renovations, like the bathrooms and the kitchens. And Needham Housing Authority needs some time for that to build up. There's also some work to do in 2025 about applying for other sources of funding. So there's state grants and federal grants around energy efficiency that'll be used to fund some of the more back of the house hidden things like your heating systems and your cooling systems. Those applications take a while to put together and for the state to review and to actually get the money out the door. So that year it's really about collecting the money to be able to do the renovation and also finishing the plans. It takes a little while to just draw the diagrams and everything to make it happen.
But then it seems kind of unrealistic that you're telling the tenants they can stay in their apartments while you're doing this their work. No way,
Well,
because
you mean during the
because the
renovation work?
chemicals that they're using to seal the floor, you know what I'm saying, and that there is like a vapor or whatever and stuff like that, and they're not gonna breathe that in.
That's a.
So you would have to
great
like
point.
move the tenant out, you know, at least 24 hours, because it takes long that. For that air to cure on the floor or whatever, you know. The adhesive,
I think it's an excellent point, and so part of the design process is you need to know what the scope of the project is gonna be in order to be able to communicate to you all how long the renovation is gonna be. So it makes a big difference whether are you doing floors and kitchens, or are you completely gutting the building, right? That impacts whether the renovation is just a long weekend that's at a hotel, or it's a month-long relocation at another unit that NHA owns. And so we recognize that it's frustrating to not have an answer to that right now.
I understand that, I understand,
And
and I'll just go by what he was saying earlier, the residents can stay in their house.
Yeah, let me parse that out, because there's something I heard there too, it's during the, I'll call the paperwork stage, the financial stage, you can stay.
Right, right,
During construction, that's when we'll have an impact. So
Right.
early 26, but leading up to it, the paperwork, you don't have to, is that correct?
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
I have a question. Last year when we initially met and this place was filled up. It was a few days later, we got some notes, I believe, from the housing authority, but on the back it said, what would you like to see being done?
right.
What do you, what's happened to that stuff?
That is a great segue.
because this was called an architect meeting, not so much a conversion meeting from PHA to, E.
Yes.
Very next slide.
So this is part of the design update. So as you all know, the housing authority has hired BH+A architects. They're the same firm that's working on the Linden Street project, just a different team in the same firm. It's led by Ben Wilson and Maria Illich. And so right now, we're at where the red line is. So we've done the project kickoff. They've done a supplemental existing conditions report, and that confirmed what is here currently, what needs to be done, what is decayed, what's the condition of the floors. So that was the first step, to actually figure out what's actually here and what needs to be worked on. They recently completed a master plan. That's something that is sort of like 10 years in the future. What could the seabeds and Cook property look like? And now we're just before receiving a draft 50% schematic design. And so in that will have a cost estimate at this early stage to tell us what we think all of the work will cost, and it'll outline line by line what exactly is in that.
So that means you still gotta save the money up to have the work done. So that'll take some time. And what the architects are doing, we still don't know what it's gonna look like, because they're still working on that. So we don't understand your plan.
And that's something that we're still working on, and I think it's a great point. We should definitely have Ben and Maria come in and.
We will. And to tie it together to the question about where the feedback has gone, so
Right.
I wanna just, so what is a schematic design of that? What are they working on right now? Schematic design is a term we use to describe plans and drawings for buildings that you couldn't hand to a builder and they could construct it, but it gives you an idea of what's gonna be done. So it says, we're gonna replace your heating system, or the kitchen is gonna get new cabinets, and it sketches it out at that level of detail. But it doesn't tell you you're gonna get a Kohler faucet. That level of detail comes in what we call construction documents, which I think is on Chris's timelines. So when we have the architect come back over the summer and give you a look at what the schematic design documents say, they're gonna be telling you the level of detail of, well, we think each of the buildings is gonna get new kitchens and new cabinets. But they might not be able to give you the full detail on, well, the tiles are going to be this particular color. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ben?
Yeah, hi, my name's Rachel. Sorry, I was late, but I had a previous, whatever you call it. So my question, one of probably many questions. But the one that I've been thinking about a lot, I haven't lived here for too long, so when you first had us writing stuff down, I didn't know what this to put down, so I haven't really paid attention. I hadn't been long enough here to start complaining. Not that I'm complaining now, but what I'm thinking about right now is that the way the apartments are built is there's no airflow. So that you know, whether it's winter or summer, we're probably spending more money than we really have to keep it either cool or warm or whatever you need. And I guess what I'm assuming, what I've gotten here is that you're not just tearing everything down inside, just keeping the frame and doing it all over, but you're keeping the things the way it is. Have you thought about other ingenious ways of creating more flow? Cause like, especially when I first started living here, what I found is that if I left my front door open and my sliding door, there'd be flow so that I wouldn't get hot and cold patches within the unit. But that really, has hit home now that I've been here 2.5 years. And, the other thing what I've noticed lately, this is just an adjective that I'm glad I remembered, I was hoping I would. is that now that it's springtime, my hot water in my shower is always warm, if not hot. In the winter, it's damn well effing cold.
Chris,
And I put that up in there for emphasis, only. So I appreciate you and, I know I was here late, if I have other questions, maybe I can ask them afterwards.
Chris, could you
Thank
speak
you.
at a high level to the system replacements, maybe not all the nuts and bolts, but just generally?
Yeah, so a component of doing the renovations is to improve things like the kitchens and the bathrooms and these sort of fixtures that you're touching. But it's also about improving the overall building system. So it's things like the ventilation,
Definitely.
the lighting, your hot water systems, your AC and your like the fin tubes that are at the bottom of the walls here. So that's all being looked at. And part of the goal of the renovation is to make the buildings much more energy efficient. So things like the building envelope, is it really leaky? How can we, and part of that is taking out those AC units, closing them up and putting in something called an air source heat pump, which is a more air source heat pump. It's getting into air source heat pump. It's basically a new machine that is more efficient at cooling or heating.
Yeah, it's just like a white
Was it
strip
central?
on the wall.
It's not central air, but it doesn't actually puncture through a wall like an AC unit does. So that's the sort of realm of scope that we're looking at. So we're definitely taking into consideration improving the airflow, ventilation, and things like that.
Excellent. Let me just add a little extra little question here. Are you also considering putting some kind of infrastructure for electric cars?
We are, that's something that we are looking into, how many it might be, or that's something that's still be.
Something that you
To be
can
decided.
add on as time goes on. I would put that.
We also think there'll be solar panels as part of the project to help
Right.
reduce the electric usage costs for everybody.
Take it with that.
Chris, do you have any more slides before we just go into straight Q&A?
There's one takeaway slide, very high level, essentially saying that the goal of the conversion is to increase the amount of money that comes to the property so that the housing authority can pursue the renovations. Rents will be calculated at the same 30% of your income. We'll be returning in the fall to get your consent for project basing the vouchers to the unit. The conversion doesn't require any relocation, so you don't have to worry about that now. And then in the future, if there's relocation required, you'll be able to return.
So if there's what?
If you have to relocate for the construction, which will be in the future, you'll have a right to return. And then just the one last thing here is, I don't know if there's any Cook residents here, but are there any Cook residents? Captain Cook residents? Yeah, okay. Well, then you can ignore this last note there. So we can continue to take any more questions. Yes,
I don't know, somebody else have a question?
sure.
My name is Paula, and I live actually behind us in one of the second floor apartments. And actually, some business per term. My apartment looks like a Cape Cod cottage. And some of the apartments have balconies. And I hope that in some way you'll have sensitivity to the environment, because we see rainbows down here and lovely cloud formations. And it would be nice if some of that sensitivity stayed in the renovation.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm in terms of
In terms of
landscaping
balconies
or-
and being able to get up in the morning, I think a lot of us get we're trying to probably sliding glass windows and drink coffee because the view's lovely.
I see. Yeah, The project isn't gonna be changing any of the major elements of the buildings like that. It's more about the interior, things like your kitchens and bathrooms and ventilation. It's not gonna be taking balconies, adding balconies or anything like that. So those will remain.
No,
You make it a
that
nice.
is just about rotted out.
Things like that will be fixed, but you're not adding a balcony for, or taking a balcony away.
No, not taking it away.
Are you thinking about adding another floor?
That's not something that we're considering now.
So are we gonna have an elevator? Which is what we need desperately.
Yeah, I think that's part of the conversation, and we'll probably have more info on that once we get this 50% SD in a couple weeks.
Because we absolutely need an elevator.
Well, realistically, the problem is the way the buildings are built.
That's been a problem.
It's, elevators are super expensive.
Yeah, well,
And if we put them in, then that means other things can't be done.
so are people's lives.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
That is
yes,
true.
and the elevators are desperately needed.
Right.
Oh, no, excuse
We
me,
know that.
Russ, right?
Hmm?
Your name is Russ?
Red
Red.
Foster,
There
yeah.
you go. And you were talking to us, right?
Good
Red,
enough.
how much does an elevator cost?
You have to put in a commercial grade elevator, not a residential grade
Is
elevator.
it like a couple of $100,000?
Yeah, it's up there in the six figures per building, yeah.
You're talking maintenance is an extreme.
So, I don't want to mislead everybody, that's a big number.
Figure.
What Sue says is absolutely true. It's ridiculous to have buildings and apartments for seniors that don't have elevators.
That's right.
Exactly. Ridiculous. And that's what they built here in the eighties,
Yeah, but
and it was pre-ADA, and we've got this dilemma because they're all spread out. And we looked at how can we, maybe can we build something in between the buildings and have, two buildings served by one, elevator. By the way, you only have one elevator. What happens when it's, down for maintenance, so all of a sudden you're talking about two elevators, so it's 2 times 6 figures that you need to put in, and then do you spend that money on elevators and not do other really critically needed things?
well, how do the other housing authorities throughout the state, they have elevators for their seniors and disabled people?
They build them in the first place, and they build more condensed buildings, like we're doing over at Bloom Street,
And I just wanted to just dwell on that for 1 second, Reg, so. I think NHA knows that not having elevators for seniors in its portfolio is an issue, and it's working to address that with the redevelopment of Linden Street. So in the future, when Linden Street is developed, it'll have over 100 units in a building with multiple elevators. That a seniors age in place here, if you get to a point where you really need an elevator and you're on a second floor unit, there'll be options available within Needham for you to move through a reasonable accommodation. No, I recognize that it's always ideal to stay in your same apartment, but it's something that future generations of seniors will benefit from having
No, there won't be.
some elevators within Needham's portfolio.
Well, that was mentioned for Seabed Way to have built like a bridge connecting the building, so people would have access. Because there are a lot of senior citizens who are handicapped and they cannot come down the stairs really by themselves, they need an elevator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for emergency purposes, there was a fire. They're not getting out, they're getting cooked.
And we've got people who have to have deliveries made. And
That's
the
why.
deliveries do not go up to their doors, they've got to somehow come down and get them.
Well, that's what neighbors are for.
Well, not all
No,
neighbors will
no,
do it,
not all
Rachel, no.
There's at least one neighbor in each building that is willing to help.
Well,
And if it's not in your building, I will be willing to help,
well,
okay?
no,
That's how
I'm
we
fine
build
with it, I'm talking
community,
about
instead of
people.
complaining
Right,
and saying that
exactly.
we can't fix it. let's find a solution and get it done.
Well, here we go, you know, we can't sugarcoat things.
No.
There's a finite amount of money. And the choices have to be made, and I'm not saying this isn't real, this is hypothetical. It's like, do we put elevators in and nobody gets a kitchen upgrade? Because, you know,
Nobody gets what?
a kitchen upgrade, no kitchen upgrades in 46 units, because we spend all the money putting elevators.
No, well, we talked about getting funding from, outside and, you know. what I'm saying?
Yeah, but there's,
You know,
it's not,
it all depends how you work that.
it's only so much money out there, that's right, exactly.
Yeah, it's funding.
Well, but if you need something
It-
for that, you
it's
can
expensive.
always find it.
I think you always.
Not for public housing.
That's really, yeah.
I think we just need to find the right person to put in there.
Yeah.
Someone like me, maybe. I'm a go-getter, not that I would know how to do it, but maybe I
if you
could
can
work
find
fast, but I'm
enough-
telling you.
If you can find the
There's
money,
always money to be had.
this is great.
Look at Bezos and look at all the other. Whatever their last name.
Bill
was.
Gates.
There you go. Yeah.
Tim Cook,
Trillions
Yeah.
of money.
Michael
Floating around.
Bloomberg.
No, look at how much money they spend on politics,
Yeah.
running a campaign, like it's all political stuff. What's up with
I
that
think
money into housing?
We definitely hear everybody on the importance of elevators, and one thing that, Chris, let's make sure to note that when we do come back in front of people to talk about design for SD. For the schematic design, we'll have the architect talk about all the thought that went into elevators, whatever the choice is, and the costs associated with it. That'll be something we dwell on when we have our design meeting.
That's what we had mentioned 20 meetings ago about elevators, building connecting and stuff like that. You know, and the designer, they were here at that meeting at that time.
Right, and now I think when we get them in front of you in the summer, they're gonna be showing you what the plan is, and it'll be the actualization of those conversations.
Right, and that was when people had said, what would you like done? You know what I'm saying? So that was put in the paperwork for the architect to go by.
Heard, yes, we understand the importance and we'll
It's
be.
very important. I mean, they'll have to
Hey,
involved.
Virgil. What we need to do is get a van. Bring everybody that wants to come to DC and, make signs. And strike in front of Congress.
No, we can all get that van and hold hands and sing that old gospel song, Kumbaya.
There you go. Yeah, in front of Congress.
Are there any, questions on different points,
No, I just wanna ask one, while we're
Yeah.
kind of on the elevator type thing. You're talking about renovating us to last the next 20 years, correct?
Yes.
That would last. As you said, Seabeds was designed for senior and disabled. So where we presently cannot put elevators in. Does that mean you're not necessarily gonna look for a senior to go on an upper floor if there's a vacancy? So in other words, it wouldn't stay a senior disabled facility here.
No, it's
I'm
going
just
for a
looking at the
maintenance.
future for new tenants, like, you know,
Future tenants.
future tenants, because right now, people who are in their 50s can't get eligible certain benefits because they're not 60. So, you know,
I can take that
Yeah.
question. So, that's really a brilliant question. And we're not in this for the short term. We're in this for the next 10 or 15 years. We have 42 acres of land in Needham. Who knows that? Who already knew that? We've said this before. That's a lot of land. And the board and the executive director are committed to answering all these problems, not from a short-term point of view, but from a long-term point of view. So if you look at a long-term point of view, for the long haul, and that's why people like Jim will be joining the board.
Right, right, that's that.
Because we need all the help we can get here. It may turn out in the future, if we can do future development like Linden Street. Yeah, we're going from 72 senior apartments to 136 senior apartments there. Maybe a better long-term solution, wasting money on elevators on these buildings,
Right.
is to put the money into Linden Street or redeveloping Chambers Street. And which will have elevators and lots of other, and apartments, it's the same size as we have here, they don't have them now. But, you know, they'll be exactly the same size.
Everyone who needs it will go over there.
But they have elevators, and maybe this housing should become housing for single
Yeah, well, that's what I mean.
people
So
who
it
need
would
it,
change.
because guess what? It's not just us that can't live here and need them. It's the service workers that work in the stores, the grocery, that work at Brooks Brothers and Sudbury's Farms at Starbucks. Nobody can afford to live in Needham. You know, there's a need to meet, you know, and, you know, young people in their 20s, who cares whether it's a walk up, they can do that all day long, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, this side of town is good for them
Right.
because it's just where all the action is.
exactly, and so what we don't wanna do, money, I love it, if you can go get Jeff Bezos to give us $1 billion. Please.
Well, and we
Yes.
related to his ex-wife, because we have
All
a,
right,
we have a name in common.
we can go there, but leaving aside miracles and pots of gold. There, money is really scarce, so we have to use it in the most effective and efficient way, and realistically, in the short term. If the choice, I will just say this for myself, if the choice is, we don't do any, you know, all 46 kitchens don't get done over, but we put 2 elevators in each one of these 4 buildings for like. North of $500,000 or something, you know, I don't know how much it's gonna cost. You know, to me, rationally, again, looking at it from a long-term point of view. You know, we want to do in short term, we want to improve what we could do here. Absolutely to the max. And we have deficiencies in the way these buildings were built in 1980s, not just that. Who was here for the seabeds, ice dam, you know, who was here for that?
Yep.
That was talk about that disaster, you know? We've got to work with what we got. But we gotta plan long-term.
Well, we can also plan on getting those stairs that you can hook up to the banister in the hallway and have.
Well,
You know what?
mention that,
We-
a wheelchair lift,
Well, we can look
that will
at,
be an elevator, it will cost less money.
and that is all being analyzed, and we have the design presentation in the fall. That, you know, what happened to all that input that we got?
Takes a lot of time.
It all went,
Because it's too
and it's
long.
being considered, and then we're gonna get from very talented professionals, here's the best we think we can do.
We're talking
Here are our options.
Well, well, I don't care about the kitchen that much. I
And then
care
order
about
for
the
them
nice
to
bath.
be taken out
That's the-
by ambulance too,
Mine is
there's no elevator, not even a wheelchair lift to them up.
And
They gotta come on.
Really good hot water, can take a nice soak.
So
Working
I
on a
said, hey,
long-term
we have elevators with
solution.
no hot water.
Man, that's all.
I know it takes long.
So we do one conversation at a time.
Two going on, so just, any questions, just three votes as one group. What question?
But go ahead.
One thing I'm thinking along with all of this is, have you considered stair arrangements, maybe stairs with landings? I know my building 40 has straight staircases that up, and that can be very hard. Or possibly ramps. It would be the other thing.
Right, the middle ground, something that's a less stressful staircase. or-
Yes, but something that maybe could help people with, plenty of rails to support.
I was mentioning wheelchair lifts. Instead of an elevator, which will cost a lot less money. You know what I'm saying?
It's been considered.
It would have to be sufficient, and that should be right by the stairs. As soon as you come in the door. If it's going to the second floor, how tall are these buildings supposed to go? Are they gonna stay second floor?
These.
Okay, if they're gonna stay second floor, a wheelchair lift.
Yeah, Channel 2 did a really nice episode on.
That's cutting costs.
a house in Lexington, I think it was, and one of their sons had some kind of, progressive disease where he would eventually not be able to climb and all that stuff, and so that, you know, how it was gonna be, cost effective, you know, and solar and all that stuff. So you need some pointers,
All of that
reach out to,
has been and will be looked at, it should be looked at.
that's a lot.
Next question.
I have a question, like I apologize already for being late here. But, one of the things I read on it was different, like if something's changing from project-based to something else. Can you quickly go over that?
Do you wanna, yeah, Chris?
Sure,
I really don't know anything, so I'll start from.
Well, if you're talking about the project-based vouchers versus, the mobile vouchers, is that what you're
Right,
asking?
the two what?
Project-based vouchers versus mobile vouchers, is that what you're
I
asking
think
about?
that's what it was, yeah.
We covered that before, and I
Yeah.
know people are starting to leave, so
Yeah.
we can talk about that individually. Is there any other new questions before everybody starts to leave here?
I guess it will be in the fall when, you know, when we have our preferences about, you know, kind of like what we'd like to see in the apartments, you know, we made out a list, you know, that was already sent in, I guess, but,
It's being considered right now,
Right.
they're gonna say, here's what looks like the answer.
okay. Okay,
and in the meantime, if you have any questions. I'm sure you know Cheryl and Reg's contact, my email is also on there as well, so, feel free to reach out with any questions.